5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Republic was not the only galactic powerhouse. In the far reaches of the Outer Rim, the Sith Empire was in its glory years, and led by one of the greatest Sith Lords to ever live, Marco Ragnos. During his reign, Ragnos was joined by some of the strongest Sith the Empire had ever seen. This included the likes of Ludo Kresh, Simus, Dor Galram, Horak Mul, and one of the most unorthodox lords of the day, Naga Sadow. Born on the Sith capital of Ziost, Naga Sadow was destined to become a great Sith. As a Sith pureblood, Sadow was a direct descendant from the 12 Dark Jedi survivors of the 100-Year Darkness. This strong bloodline was one of the purest in the Sith Empire, and garnered the attention of the Sith Lord Simus, who eventually became both his teacher and mentor. During this time, he mastered his skills with the blade, and dug into the deepest, darkest secrets of Sith magic. Over time, Sadow had grown in stature among the Sith Lords, and became a member of the Sith Council, a group of Sith who served as advisors to the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith. However, Sadow had grown sick of his position, and coveted the crown of Dark Lord for himself. In 5000 BBY, Marco Ragnos died, and Sadow saw his chance. At Ragnos' funeral, Sadow claimed the title of Dark Lord for himself, but was opposed by his greatest rival, Ludo Kresh. In accordance with Sith traditions, the Sith Lords embarked on a battle to the death, but were interrupted in the middle of the battle by the spirit of Marco Ragnos, who appeared to warn Sadow and Kresh that the balance of the Sith Empire hung on their ability to lead the Sith people. Whether by luck or destiny, two hyperspace explorers, Gav and Jory Daragon, landed on Korriban. The pair were immediately imprisoned, and Sadow realized that they could be the key to furthering his own agenda. After breaking the pair out of prison, which he then framed on the Republic, and seemingly defeating his rival at the Battle of Kar Shine, Naga Sadow's plot succeeded. As the undisputed Dark Lord, Sadow rallied his forces behind his expansionist vision, and launched a huge surprise invasion of the Galactic Republic. With this move, the Great Hyperspace War had begun. While other Sith Lords were on the ground, Sadow instead led the war effort from his Sith meditation sphere, giving his forces a psychological edge. The Dark Lord used his mastery of Sith magic to create illusions, making his forces appear much more formidable than they actually were, augmenting them with illusionary beasts and ships. Sadow's war was initially met with great success, and was on the cusp of victory, until the dark side once again turned on itself. Sadow's apprentice betrayed him, and broke his battle meditation. Despite surviving the attack and killing his old apprentice, the brief confusion allowed the Republic to counterattack, forcing Sadow to retreat all the way back to Sith space. Upon his return home, Sadow was met with another curveball. Ludo Kresh had survived, and proclaimed himself Dark Lord of the Sith in Sadow's absence. After a vicious battle, Sadow prevailed, but was forced to retreat once again when pursuing Republic forces arrived. With his empire destroyed, Sadow took up refuge on the lush moon of Yavin 4. While his forces created vast temples to honor his legacy, Sadow spent time continuing his studies of Sith alchemy, learning how to assert his will on the natural order of the universe. After decades of practicing, Sadow decided it was time to place himself in stasis, vowing not to return until the fires of conflict had burned out, and a new apprentice had risen to bring about a new golden age of the Sith. That day came in 4400 BBY, when he was discovered and awakened by a curious Jedi named Frida Nad, who had stumbled upon Yavin 4 during his quest to learn more about the dark side. Believing that Nad was the apprentice for whom he had been waiting centuries for, Sadow taught Nad his Sith secrets, only for his newfound apprentice to eventually turn on and finally kill the legendary Sith Lord. Despite failing in his conquests, Sadow's power and skill in the dark side was remembered for generations, and managed to rightfully cement his legacy as one of the strongest dark side users in galactic history. After the fall of the Galactic Empire in 4 ABY, it was all but thought that the Sith threat was extinguished. While the galaxy saw few sightings here and there, such as the rise of Darth Kaitis in 40 ABY, the true threat was hidden in the shadows in the far reaches of the Outer Rim. As long as the Jedi were around, the Sith would be reborn yet again, as shown by Revan and Malak, Darth Ruin, and now, Ashred Het, the leader of the One Sith. For more than 100 years, Ashred, now dubbed Darth Krayt, grew and strengthened the One Sith Order on Korriban, planning to bring its vision of peace and order to the galaxy. While the Order grew in secret, Krayt attempted to heal his wounds inflicted upon him by the Vong, going into lengthy stasis treatments and conferring only with his most trusted servant. That servant is the tale of our story today, and was known as Darth Warlock III. Darth Warlock III was the third in his lineage to hold the title, and was the grandson of the first Darth Warlock and the son of the second. The Warlocks were Krait's closest allies, and it was their duty to tend to their master's health and see his plans for the One Sith put in motion while he was in stasis. The third Warlock eventually surpassed his relatives, not only acting as an attendant and a servant, but as Krait's spokesman, and one of the few people he actually considered a friend. At the twilight of the Sith Imperial War, Darth Krait made his move and seized control of the Imperial throne, becoming Emperor. Over the next 7 years, Krait continued to establish his empire with Warlock at his side, oftentimes serving as the Emperor's main advisor. Despite this, the new Emperor's body continued to deteriorate, and the end was getting closer and closer. While Krait remained optimistic about his condition, Warlock wasn't convinced, and made his way to the final resting place of Darth Endedu in search of a cure. After besting the ancient Sith Lord in a battle of illusions, Warlock returned confident that ancient knowledge would guide him in his mission. Before he could do this, however, Warlock joined Krait in several of his hands to head Abaddon, as Celeste Morn, seemingly under the influence of Carnasmur, claimed he would be able to heal him of his ailment with his arcane powers. This turned out to be a trap, and during the ensuing fight, Krait was gravely injured. Discovering his master's fallen body, Warlock was amazed when Krait awoke, and revealed that he had discovered a way in which he could heal himself. The Dark Lord, however, had other ideas, and electrocuted his master with Sith lightning, killing him. Returning to Coruscant and pretending that Krait had resumed one of his many periods of hibernation, Warlock assumed Krait's position as Galactic Emperor, and continued the implementation of Krait's dream, to initiate every living being in the galaxy into the One Sith Order. His reign was short-lived, however, as Krait managed to survive the Chagrin's treachery, and revealed his will and presence to all those in the galaxy that had ever been touched by the dark side. Krait eventually made his way to Coruscant, and the two ignited their blades for a fight to the death. The ensuing duel was an impressive display of force abilities and lightsaber prowess, both combatants unleashing the full fury of the dark side to kill each other. Ultimately, it was Krait who managed to trick Warlock and defeat him. Despite being branded a traitor, Warlock still left his mark on the One Sith, managing to stick out in an era littered with Sith Lords. Naga Sadow was a Sith pureblood, and was believed to be roughly a century in age by the time of his death on Yavin 4. The Sith purebloods were a hybridization of the Dark Jedi humans and the original Sith species that hailed from Korriban. For nearly 2,000 years, superstition, loyalty, and sympathy were bred out as the two groups interbred, and qualities such as cunning, ambition, and affinity to the Force were favored, which shaped Sith society over the centuries. One's specific characteristics were determined based on how much Dark Jedi, or Sith blood, an individual possessed, due to the interbreeding. By the time of the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY, the majority of the Sith within the Empire displayed many Sith traits. Sadow, on the other hand, was a relatively rare exception to this rule, and possessed one of the purest Jedi lineages, with minimal Sith blood. Because of this, the Dark Lord showed many human features, including 5 fingers and toes on his hands and feet, as well as the absence of bone spurs and eyebrow stalks. However, it was the Sith pureblood's bright red skin and yellow eyes that made them impossible to miss. Compared to humans, the Sith purebloods possessed many of the same attributes, with the exception of heightened senses and increased durability. Despite Sadow's age, it was common for Sith to live many centuries, placing Sadow right in the midst of his physical prime. With an incredibly muscular physique, it should surprise no one that the Dark Lord's strength was formidable. He could easily match the strength of other Force wielders, such as he did against Ludo Kresh. He also had enough strength to smash a Sith sword, which are noted as being durable enough to withstand lightsaber strikes, without fracturing or breaking. Unlike many during this time, Sadow didn't neglect his speed and agility, and was fairly nimble for a man his size. He demonstrated this on countless occasions, one of the best coming during the raid on Ziost, where he managed to outmaneuver several Massassi warriors. Massassi warriors being some of the most ferocious beings in the Old Sith Empire, possessing great size, strength, and agility. He also used this speed in his duels, generating multiple afterimages of his Sith sword during his fight against Kresh. The Dark Lord's endurance was also not lacking, and is never fatigued in the midst of battle. In my eyes, Naga Sadow's greatest physical attribute came in the form of his pain tolerance. The Dark Lord has shrugged off minor wounds like they were nothing, and even more impressively, managed to resist the bites of various Sith insects while being christened the new Dark Lord of the Sith. Sadow's species-inherited traits no doubt boost this ability even more. At the end of the day, Sadow's imposing appearance is backed up with a wide range of traits, making him an incredibly imposing opponent. Darth Warlock III was a male Chagrian, and although his age was never stated, seemed to be middle-aged and in the midst of his physical prime. Chagrians were a species of amphibious humanoids native to the planet of Shambhala. The average Chagrian stood much taller than the average human, and sported blue skin, ranging from the tone of light blue to indigo, or, in this case, crimson red. They were distinguished by two fleshy growths protruding from the sides of their heads, which they called lethorns. Males also sported two horns growing from the top of their skulls. In addition to this, they also possessed acute low-light vision, as well as a natural resistance to radiation, which can be traced back to a period of solar instability coinciding with the early evolution of life on Shambhala. Compared to humans, besides being much larger in stature, don't have one trait that truly stuck out, such as Zabraks or Naudilans, who were both known for their incredible resilience. Darth Warlock's agility and speed were in my eyes his most competent abilities. Both of these were on full display against the reborn Darth Krayt on Coruscant, using his agility to avoid Krayt's lightsaber blade, and attacking with his own speed, creating multiple afterimages of his blade. His strength was also solid, if only average. Although not shown, he was by his master's side on Coruscant, and it can easily be inferred that he engaged with several of Rowanfel's Imperial Knights, matching their power with no difficulty. This also demonstrates the Chagrian's high level of endurance, not tiring in the midst of battle. He also managed to fend off the powerful strength-based attacks of his master. Darth Warlock's pain tolerance was also quite formidable, the best showing coming on Prakith, where he tanked a barrage of rocks hurled at him from the reborn Darth Endedu. Overall, despite not having one trait that truly stands out, Warlock still had a well-rounded physical profile, which led him to being competitive in all situations, against any type of opponent. I think this round is pretty straightforward. Breaking it down from the top, both men were in great physical shape, and their physical profiles allow them to succeed regardless of the situation. When comparing the two species, I think it's safe to say that Naga Sadow has the slight edge. While Warlock's Chagrian biology gives him increased height, acute low-light vision, and resistance to radiation, this doesn't really help him in a one-on-one battle on neutral ground. Sadow, on the other hand, possessed heightened senses and increased durability, both of which would be beneficial in a fight to the death. Looking at individual traits, Sadow holds the power advantage, and his showings in this category in my eyes are much better than what Warlock has demonstrated. Sadow also takes the edge in resilience. His species-inherited boost amplifies his already formidable resilience. Although, I should note, Warlock is no pushover here, as his showings on Prakith are quite impressive. Endurance-wise and agility-wise, I see the pair as equals, both able to compete in intense duels for a long period of time without tiring, as well as being fairly nimble for men their size. While both men have achieved the height of their species' physicality, only one has shown displays worthy of the advantage. Where Darth Warlock has no specific traits that stand out, Naga Sadow's durability and strength sure do, and in conjunction with the species' inherited traits, grant him the edge. Naga Sadow gets the edge. Despite being primarily known for his skills in the dark arts, Naga Sadow was no pushover when it came to his martial skill. This is reinforced by the fact that Sith marauders of Vitiate's Sith Empire followed his teachings, highlighting the fact that his skills as a sword fighter were renowned, even a millennia after his death. On top of this, Naga Sadow is among the ancient Sith Lords whom Kreia claims are vastly superior sword fighters to the Jedi and Sith of her age, specifically claiming that the exile and herself were children playing with toys compared to the prowess of the old masters. While this claim can and has been debated, it is still worth mentioning, showing the high level of respect Sadow had as a swordsman. In my original analysis of Naga Sadow in my Naga Sadow vs Count Dooku video, which was one of my original versus videos I ever made, I explained I believe that Sadow was a practitioner of Form 2 Makashi. I now have a vastly different opinion. When the Dark Jedi arrived on Korriban at the end of the 100-Year Darkness, lightsabers were still a relatively new weapon, and the only developed forms were Form 1 Shicho and Form 2 Makashi. It is my belief that these forms became integrated in Sith lifestyle, becoming the backbone to the Dark Lord's personalized styles. In Naga Sadow's case, I believe that he took Shicho as the foundation of his personalized fighting style and modified it around his formidable strength. This makes a lot of sense, considering Sadow is a highly aggressive fighter who puts his strength to bear. In my eyes, this would be the closest to a modern-day Djem-So. In order to employ this technique, Sadow utilized his Sith sword. Sith swords were the primary weapon of the Sith at the time of the Great Hyperspace War. This was either due to the Empire lacking the resources to construct such weapons, tradition, or because they preferred a more visceral feeling of a sword cutting through flesh. These swords were constructed through various metallurgical and arcane means, transmuting base metals into an alchemical alloy possessing an unusual affinity for the dark side. These alchemical alterations allowed the sword to block incoming lightsaber attacks, as well as deflect and absorb blaster bolts in much the same way a lightsaber did. This worked in a manner similar to that of Cortosis and Frick, which also had the ability to reflect laser beams, and other coherent light weapons. However, these swords also served as a focus for the dark energies of its wielder, amplifying their power and refining their control until they become a walking nexus of dark side power. Sadow took this even higher, and with such potent dark side abilities, managed to make it a poison sword. This would in turn poison and weaken his opponents, if cut by his blade. His use of the sword also reinforces my idea of Sadow's strength-oriented personalized style, given the fact that his blade had the means to make power strikes more effective, and his natural physical strength would further lead him to this style of fighting. However, there is a downside to his choice. Despite his sword being a beautiful piece of weaponry, it was very heavy and not as maneuverable in the midst of combat. On top of this, their durability is a red flag. While they will manage in most situations and are able to block lightsabers and blaster bolts, they can still break if hit with enough force, as demonstrated by Ludo Kresh, who was able to smash his sword just out of pure muscle. In addition to his sword, Sadow wore a set of battle armor and Sith gauntlets. This armor was common amongst the Sith of his day. It appeared to be fairly heavy, although it did not hamper the Sith Lord's mobility in the midst of combat. In my eyes, I believe this armor was capable of shrugging off minor strikes, and maybe even blaster fire, but a dedicated lightsaber or sword strike would still go through it. And finally, while his gauntlets were capable of creating large force blasts, as demonstrated by Exar Kun, they provide little to no defensive help. Sadow took his personalized form to the highest of his abilities, and only his rival Ludo Kresh stood a chance against him in the midst of a duel. Offensively, Sadow was absolutely relentless, but also very smart. He would meet his attacker head-on, aggressively using his strength to cut through and ultimately overpower his opponent. Oftentimes, this was done with wide power attacks. He wouldn't do this in some berserker way either, such as Sora Bulk. Instead, he was intense, but also calculated, aiming at his opponent's target zones, specifically their head, back, arms, and legs. His strikes were also not overly fast, but instead calculated and powerful, similar to those of Plo Koon, albeit on a much more aggressive and intense level to that of the Keldor. Defensively, Sadow would plant his feet and become an immovable object. He would stand his ground and meet his opponent head-on, analyzing his foe's weak points and then striking such points with great precision, oftentimes with devastating effects. This is also very similar to the Form 5 practice of defending before immediately counterattacking, once more reinforcing my belief that Sadow's style was reminiscent of Djem-So. With the style so focused on strength, as well as using a sword rather than a lightsaber, one would also be inclined to believe that Sadow was weak against ranged weaponry, and I tend to agree with this assumption. This is not because Sadow is a bad combatant, more due to inexperience as these weapons were not very common in the old Sith Empire. As a master of the dark side, it should come to no surprise that the Dark Lord was very fond of incorporating force attacks into his sequences. This oftentimes came in the form of telekinesis. He did this against Kresh, telekinetically hurling bricks at his head, knocking him down and causing his head to bleed. Tactically, Naga Sadow was brilliant and one of the most cunning strategists of his time. He managed to do this on both a large scale and a small one as well. On a large scale, he was able to conduct a battle plan to all his armies across the galaxy that managed to nearly topple the Republic while both undermanned and underarmed. He also demonstrated this on his return to Korriban, where he managed to outwit and ultimately kill Ludo Kresh and his fleet, despite being ambushed and having his own fleet badly damaged. His tactical mind can also be seen in one-on-one duels, where he analyzes his foe's weak points before developing the best plan of attack. In my eyes, this is his greatest asset, and would allow him to compete against swordsmen superior to him, similar to the famed Jedi Guardian Kavar. In terms of overall skill, I would place him on the same tier as that of Sora Bulk. Both combatants are skilled swordsmen, who would best most, but could be defeated by absolute masters with the blade. While many may argue this because he couldn't defeat Jedi Master Wyyrlok III while possessing Isengin Gin, I disagree. This comes down to 4 specific factors. For one, the weapon he was using was a lightsaber, which he was inexperienced with, having most likely never used one in a serious lightsaber duel before. Next, Sadow was inexperienced with or against double-bladed lightsabers, in particular which Master Over was using. Not to mention, the Dark Lord was out of practice for over 1,000 years. And finally, that this version of Sadow was only a fraction of him, and not his essence in its entirety. With so many factors going against him, Sadow still managed to push this respected Jedi to his absolute limit. At the end of the day, Naga Sadow was a dangerous combatant for anyone, and his unique style, power, and cunning mind were worthy of a Sith Lord. Despite not being one of Krait's hands, Darth Warlock III was arguably the second best duelist in the One Sith Order. Where a hand was designed to be Krait's personal assassins and execute his orders with incredible efficiency on the battlefield, Warlock worked more behind the scenes, using his mind to aid his master in high-profile decisions. However, this does not mean that the Chagrin was incapable as a lightsaber combatant. Although he has only been seen in one major duel, his showing in it was very impressive, briefly contending with the reborn Darth Krait for some time. Despite the fact that Warlock's specific lightsaber style is never stated, I think there's enough present to make an educated guess. Under the rule of one, followers of Krait were taught blind obedience and absolute loyalty to him, resulting in Krait having an impact in almost every aspect of Sith life. This would include martial training. However, unlike the ancient Sith before him who preferred forms 1, 5, and 7, I believe Krait emphasized the teachings of Form 6 Nyman, as it was his own preferred style. While there are exceptions to this rule, such as Talon and Nile, who preferred Form 4 and their own personalized form respectively, Warlock seems to fit the traditional One Sith mold as a Nyman practitioner. This is reinforced by Warlock's loyalty to Krait's vision, as well as frequent use of Force powers integrated within his lightsaber strikes, a core aspect of the Nyman style. As stated in countless of my Versus videos, including my Kavar Verse and Terry's Draco video, I explained that I thought Nyman masters usually came in 3 distinct flavors. Them being those who studied Form 6 as a supplement to their Force abilities, or focused on another discipline, and truly didn't focus on martial might, such as Johann Othon. Masters who used the style passively, using Nyman's adaptability to counter an opponent's style, adjusting their technique to suit the needs of the moment. And finally, a user who took all the styles and constantly changed forms in the midst of combat to overwhelm, confuse, and overpower opponents. In my eyes, Darth Warlock was clearly in the first flavor. The Dark Lord's preferred weapon of choice was a relatively standard single-bladed lightsaber. The blade was powered by a single red synthetic crystal, giving him more cutting power at the expense of maneuverability. The hilt of this weapon also appeared to be wrapped in York coral, the signature of the One Sith. Warlock also appeared to wear a suit of light battle armor, which offered him considerable protection despite its weight, as well as maintaining good flexibility. While it has decent defensive capabilities, it wouldn't hold up against a dedicated lightsaber strike, as proven by Krait in their final duel. Warlock's style ultimately stuck to the teachings of his preferred form, and was based around moderation, applying what was needed in the given situation, and nothing more. This is also vastly different than many Sith swordsmen, who often focus on overwhelming and dominating their opponent, rather than a balanced, relaxed approach. Offensively, Warlock used balanced blade work, as is the norm with Form 6 users. He would constantly press his opponent until an opening presented itself, opening up an opportunity for either a killing strike with his saber, or more likely, his devastating force powers. He also utilized different looks at his opponents to keep them guessing. This can be seen by his tendency to switch between two-handed and one-handed attacks, mixing up power strikes with fast, precise ones. This approach also made the Chagrin less exposed while in the offensive, limiting his opponent's ability to counterattack. Defensively, Warlock would meet his opponent's blade before quickly looking to use a force power as a way to disengage with his foe. He also recognized the relatively balanced and basic blade work of Nyman could be taken advantage of by a more skilled swordsman. To compensate for this, he would use his agility to outmaneuver his opponents, opening them up for a counterattack with a new angle. This is relatively impressive to me. It shows the Dark Lord didn't become a slave to his form, recognizing its weaknesses, and developing other techniques in order to compensate for it. Warlock has also never been seen defending against blaster-wielding assailants, but we can assume he is quite adept as blast deflection was a fairly common attribute for most Sith of his day. As a master of Form 6, and with his immense power on the dark side, it should come to no surprise that Krait's voice was also quite fond of incorporating force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences. This was one of his go-to moves in a duel. He would use his saber, and when an opening emerged, he would level his opponent with telekinesis, force lightning, or the brutal memory walk. Speaking of Form 6, Naiman also opens the door for skill in Jarkai dual blade fencing. Warlock took full advantage of this, once more utilizing a skill that his master also employed. While we have never seen the Chagrin use this skill in combat, multiple sources depict him wielding 2 blades, and I believe that he was fully capable of wielding 2, even if he only preferred 1 blade. I believe that his use in this came down to the situation. A good example of this can be seen in TCW, where Sidious wields 2 blades against Maul and Savage, despite preferring to only use 1 blade a majority of the time. Tactically, I feel Warlock is only average. While he has displayed good battlefield awareness, and can lead forces to victory, as demonstrated during the Sith Imperial War, acting as Krait's main advisor, he has been in very few lightsaber battles, and his mind was more focused on studying the dark arts, rather than martial combat. That said, he knew his skill in the Force was his strong point, and tries to get the fight in a position to employ such powers. At the end of the day, while Darth Warlock may employ a relatively basic and balanced form, he knew his strong points, and still possessed a solid amount of skill with the lightsaber. Unlike the previous round, this one is a little challenging. Despite both combatants being primarily known for their skills in the Force, Naga Sadow and Darth Warlock III both had a fairly good amount of skill with the blade. Breaking it down from the top, Naga Sadow utilized his own unique personalized fighting style that was powerful and aggressive. On the other hand, Darth Warlock took his master's preferred form and used Naiman in a way that highlighted his strengths. Offensively, I give the edge to Sadow. Where Warlock would attempt to press Sadow, he would soon realize this was a poor choice, given his balanced blade work. Sadow's powerful calculated attacks are underrated, and his combination of power and precision were world-class. In addition, his constant counterattacking gives him another aspect that Warlock would need to address. Defensively, I would say that the pair are equals. Both have shown that they can defend against all types of attacks, just in different ways. Where Sadow plants his feet and becomes an immovable object, Warlock tries to use the Force to gain distance, or uses agility to avoid certain attacks. Although vastly different techniques, they are still effective and fit each combatant's style perfectly. Tactically, it's where we see a clear and decisive edge in favor of the ancient Sith. Warlock has shown that he is decent in this field, demonstrating so in his tendencies to put his strengths first, and during the Sith Imperial War. But Sadow is just in a whole different ballpark. This is a being that was able to conduct a battle plan to all his armies across the galaxy while both undermanned and underarmed, outwitting and killing Ludo Kresh and his fleet, despite being ambushed and having his own fleet badly damaged, and finally, using his mind in one-on-one combat, allowing him to contend with others who are more skilled than he. Warlock also has a huge advantage when it comes to his weaponry. As much as I love Naga Sadow's Sith Poison Sword, it is nothing compared to the One Sith's lightsaber. Sadow's Sith Sword is heavy and difficult to move. However, for as heavy as it is, Sadow uses it well. But in the end, a lightsaber is the better and more practical weapon. Sadow's armor is also heavy, but I am not going to hold that against him, as he still moves relatively well. When I first started this script, I felt that Warlock would have a clear advantage when it came to experience, which would lead him to an edge in this round. My thought process here had to do with Sadow's era, where most Sith put their time into the dark arts, and not so much dueling, whereas Warlock lived in an era where saber-to-saber combat was a frequent occurrence. But after looking more into it, it's clear Sadow probably fought with his blade as frequently, if not more than Warlock. What determines this round to me is Sadow's personalized style, as well as his incredible tactical mind. This style is unique to Sadow, and something Warlock would have never seen. On top of this, while Sadow was pounding away on his foe, he was also analyzing his foe's weak points, before developing the best plan of attack and striking back with devastating force. Although Warlock holds an edge in weaponry, Sadow's superior offensive skill, personalized style, and tactical mind grant him the advantage. Naga Sadow gets the edge. Despite only reigning for a limited time, Naga Sadow's power was recognized as one of the greatest in the history of the Sith Order. His achievements also went beyond just the Sith Order, and was recognized by both the Jedi and the Sith Orders. Jedi historian Naga Sadow considered Sadow to be one of the most powerful and legendary Sith Lords ever, and Darth Bane compared him to the powerful Darth Revan, an Exar Kun. Sadow's power could even be felt after his death, leaving behind dark side energies in his tomb, which managed to drive Jedi Master Wyyrlok III half insane. This says something about his dark side prowess as well, as Master O'Vare was no pushover, and was powerful enough to conceal his dark side presence and Sith heritage from the Jedi Order. Like all Force wielders, Naga Sadow is able to use the Force to augment his physical traits. He paired this with Force Rage, boosting his already formidable strength, speed, agility, and finally, his ability to hold up in intense lightsaber duels. In terms of telekinesis, Naga Sadow was quite adept. He could perform Force pushes, shoves, and grips with no difficulty, and had no difficulty in moving large objects around. He demonstrated this in his duel against Kresh, hurling bricks at his head, as well as his spirit using a Force wave on Darth Nox, a very powerful Force user, and future Dark Council member, sending him flying. The latter is a very impressive display, as his spirit was only a fraction of his true power. The Dark Lord was also capable of using this power defensively, using it to create a sphere of Force energy around him, negating incoming attacks. Telepathically, we start to see why Sadow is considered to be such a powerful Force wielder. He was a master in the classical Jedi mind trick, and took this ability to its highest levels. He was so potent in this skill that he was able to control the minds of his victims, no mean feat. In addition to this, Sadow would utilize Force Corruption. Force Corruption is a dark side variant of telepathy that involves corrupting the mind and will of the others to serve the user, often tainting them with the dark side. This can be seen during the lead-up to the Great Hyperspace War, where Sadow slowly corrupted Gav Daragon, luring him to the dark side. In addition to this power can also be applied on locations, corrupting and tainting entire environments, eventually turning them to nexuses of dark side energy. Sadow also did this on Yavin 4, becoming part of the reason why Yavin 4 became an immensely powerful dark side nexus over the millennia. One of Sadow's most potent telepathic abilities came in his form of Force Illusions. Force Illusion is a Force ability stemming from a myriad of mental abilities, allowing one to project images and illusions into another being's mind, or create actual apparitions. He took this to its highest level, and his illusions distorted all of an individual's sensory perceptions, making it nearly impossible to tell if these illusions were real or not. He did this once again during the Great Hyperspace War, summoning illusions of endless armies, so realistic that they couldn't be discerned by the Jedi, as well as inflicting actual real damage. While it is unclear whether or not the Sith Lord could create these without his meditation sphere, I personally believe he can, just on a much smaller scale. Perhaps Sadow's most powerful display of telepathic power came in his use of Battle Meditation and Battle Mind. Battle Meditation was a rare Force ability that considerably boosted the morale, stamina, and overall battle prowess of an individual's allies, while simultaneously reducing the opposition's combat effectiveness by eroding their will to fight. Sadow utilized this ability while in his meditation sphere, coordinating his allies and even entire fleets of ships, allowing them to perform at maximum efficiency. This allowed the Sith Empire to nearly defeat the Republic, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Battle Mind was similar to Battle Meditation, just on a smaller scale. It was a power wherein one's moral and fighting spirit was augmented through sheer focus, giving a user the drive to fight through even the hardest of conflicts. One could overcome the disabilities of old age, and even fading stamina. Users of Battle Mind could find themselves fighting with a great deal of fury, and also controlled passion, something Sadow displayed during his duel with Kresh. In terms of more conventional darkside powers, Naga Sadow has never been seen employing Force Lightning. Despite this, it is implied that as a Sith sorcerer, he would have been able to do so. To me, this is too much speculation, however, and while I think it is well within his ability to do so based on his overall power level, it is still too much speculation for my taste. However, the same cannot be said for Force Drain. Force Drain rekindled Force energy in the user, offensively draining the Force energy from those whom the power was turned upon. Unlike Darth Nihilus, however, who was able to use this power on a whim, Sadow used this skill in rituals. His skill in these rituals was highly advanced, and it is implied that he knew the ritual the Sith Emperor used to drain the Thema of all life. It was also his skills in Force Drain that allowed Exar Kun to do his famed ritual, where he drained the life forces of his Massassi warriors in order to ascend to a higher plane of existence, as this was one of Sadow's ancient techniques. As stated earlier, Sadow wore a set of powerful gauntlets. These gauntlets amplified and focused the rage of the user and unleashed beams of raw darkside energy. The power of these beams could also vary depending on Sadow's intent. As shown by Exar Kun, the beam could be used to nearly incapacitate an opponent, or decimate whatever stood in his way. Unlike Force Lightning, I do believe Sadow capable of using this power, as well as incorporating these powers into his martial sequences. Finally, we have come to Sadow's bread and butter, his skills in Sith sorcery and alchemy. Sith alchemy was a technique which used the dark side of the Force to permanently alter an item or living being, twisting it against the Force's will. Sadow was a true master in this art, and was capable of altering the molecular composition of living beings, as well as reshaping inanimate objects, such as he did with his sword and armor, making them more resilient. However, his most impressive display came when he altered an exogirth into a gargantuan Sith worm. Much like his skills in alchemy, Sadow was a true master of Sith sorcery. Sith sorcery or Sith magic was accessible only to those Force-sensitive who possessed an intrinsic relationship with the dark side. Through the recitation of spells, execution of hand gestures, and/or the handling of various artifacts, Darksiders were able to channel the raw power of the Force to warp minds, alter the environment, and obliterate whatever obstacles stood in their way. As I've said countless times throughout this video, Sadow proved his skill in this during the events of the Great Hyperspace War. After being betrayed by his apprentice, Sadow used his skills in sorcery as well as using the technology aboard the Corsair to create a supernova, destroying all enemies in his wake while he retreated back to Sith space. An even more impressive display of sorcery came in the ensuing battle. While retreating from Republic forces, Sadow flew his warship between a tight binary star, the Denari Nova, and used his Sith magic to create solar flares, destroying the Republic ships in pursuit. Like some Sith Lords, Sadow also managed to discover a technique that allowed him to live on as a Force ghost. While not necessarily a combatively viable technique, it is still impressive, as few Sith have managed to accomplish such a feat. In addition to this, Naga Sadow learned the art of essence transfer. However, much like Darth Bane, Sadow would most likely not attempt to use this in combat, unless as an absolute last resort, as it was nearly impossible to overcome a spirit already residing in a body, and the practitioner's own body disintegrated in the attempt. However, unlike many who are credited with this ability, Sadow has actually employed it, using it on the talented Jedi Ensign Gint, possessing his body. Overall, Naga Sadow is one of the greatest users of the dark side in galactic history. His skill in the traditional and exoteric powers were rivaled by few, and would give any opponents difficulty. Darth Warlock III was a master in the dark side of the Force, and was second only to Darth Krayt in raw power. As the reigning lore master of the One Sith, the Chagrian had access to large amounts of knowledge from across the eons, knowledge he soaked up and embraced. Like all Force wielders, Warlock was able to use the Force to augment his physical traits. He paired this with Force Rage, boosting his already formidable strength, speed, agility, and finally, allow him to hold up in intense duels. In terms of telekinesis, Warlock was very adept. He could perform Force pushes, shoves, and grips with no difficulty, and had no difficulty in moving large objects around. The best example of this can be seen during his fight with Krayt, where he effortlessly hurled rocks from a shattered stone pillar at his master. He was also capable of using telekinesis in more violent ways, the best example being his use of Force Choke, which was a favorite of the Dark Lord, especially when used for disciplinary reasons. He did this to Regent Veed in the aftermath of his issue of the final protocol on Dak, after Veed stormed into his quarters, enraged he wasn't informed of the decision. In addition to this, Warlock had no difficulties employing telekinesis defensively. He would create a barrier or wall of Force energy around him, able to withstand certain attacks. The voice of the One Sith was also very proficient in this, defending himself with this skill from many rocks hurled at him by the resurrected Darth Krayt. This is very impressive, considering Reborn Krayt is one of the strongest Force wielders in galactic history. Darth Warlock's true skills, however, came in his telepathic abilities. He was a master in the classical Jedi mind trick, and took this ability to its highest level. He was also so potent in this skill that he was able to convince multiple beings at once, such as he did to the cultists on Prakith. He was also a very potent illusionist. As stated earlier, Force illusion is a Force ability stemming from a myriad of mental abilities, allowing one to project images and illusions into another being's minds, or create actual apparitions. Much like Sadow, Warlock took this to its highest level, and his illusions distorted all of an individual's sensory perceptions, making it nearly impossible to tell if these illusions were real or not. Once again, he used this power on the cultists on Prakith, creating illusions of himself to influence the cultists to kill each other. It is also worth mentioning that Warlock claimed to only be using an iota of his power to perform this feat. However, this could just be due to Warlock's ego. Besides the cultists, his most impressive display of this technique came against Darth Ndedu. In that fight, he manages to outwit the ancient Sith and ultimately defeat him. This is incredibly impressive considering Ndedu was known for his power in the dark side, as well as being skilled in illusions and sorcery himself. Despite being a powerful illusionist, Darth Warlock's most dangerous telepathic ability came in the form of the Memory Walk. Memory Walk was a Force ability first developed by the Jedi Vindicators. However, through the years, various dark side groups twisted this ability into something far more evil. The ability consisted of mentally reaching out into the victim's mind, forcing them to relive all the worst memories of their life, both painful ones and ones that were merely embarrassing, over and over and over again, to the point where it almost seemed to cause physical pain. It is not just explicit memories either that can be brought to the forefront of the mind. It is its underlying fears and insecurities, the what-ifs that could be capitalized on, as Darth Maladi demonstrated on Cade, casting an illusion of himself as a Sith Lord and killing his loved ones. While no doubt a dangerous move, it was not as powerful or potent as the spells of fear and madness casted by Darth Zano, another ability similar to the Memory Walk. This ability was also risky in the midst of combat. Because of the link created during the attack, the opponent, if mentally strong enough, could provide the target with insight into the attacker's fears. This allowed the opponent to not only break the attack, but also turn it back on the user. Warlock used this in his final fight, reaching into the mind of Darth Krayt, bringing him to his knees. However, it should also be noted that Krayt may have been baiting him, opening him up for the killing blow. I also believe Warlock to have good defense against this attack, and would not end up like Darth Maladi if this attack was turned back on him. My reasoning for this is simple. Wouldn't it have been easier for Krayt, one of the strongest Sith in galactic history, to simply just turn the attack back on Warlock, rather than maybe kill him with the blade? While just a minor detail, I still felt it was worth bringing up. In terms of conventional Sith powers, Warlock was a practiced hand in the use of Force Lightning. His skill in this ability was highly advanced, and is capable of using it in a lethal manner. He was capable of shattering 2 stone columns, as well as destroying Krayt's armor, which was lightsaber and blaster resistant, 2 very impressive displays. Warlock, in addition to his powerful offensive abilities, also had solid defensive ones, specifically his skill in Tuta Minis. He proved this once again on Praketh, deflecting Darth Nidetto's lightning with ease. This is especially notable, considering deflecting lightning with the Force is considered a challenge, even for the most powerful Jedi Masters. Finally, Warlock's most interesting powers came in his knowledge of Sith sorcery. His skills in this field were similar to Sadow's, in the sense that he used the power in rituals. His unparalleled knowledge of Sith lore and these rituals were very impressive, especially considering this art was accessible only to those Force sensitives who possessed an intrinsic relationship with the dark side. Overall, Darth Warlock stood out in his era as a powerful Force wielder. This is backed up even more when we show his closest rivals, Nihil and Talon, got manhandled by Krayt, whereas Warlock matched him for a majority of the contest. Being second only to Reborn Krayt in raw Force power is not anything to be ashamed of, and I would easily place the Shagreen on the same tier as Count Dooku in this field. Underestimating Darth Warlock would be a major mistake, and his blend of conventional, exoteric, and defensive Force abilities prove this. This round is closer than one would think. Both Naga Sadow and Darth Warlock III are complete masters of the dark side, and were able to master some of the deepest and darkest secrets that few ever hoped of learning. In terms of telekinesis, I would say the pair are equals, as each is able to lift and move large objects with ease, as well as using the power defensively. Telepathically, I give the slight edge to Sadow. Both are skilled in mind manipulation, but Sadow controlled the minds of certain beings, whereas Warlock cannot. Sadow could also use dark corruption, however this doesn't have much combative use in this contest. And both were very skilled in casting illusions. Sadow gets the edge here due to his skills in battle meditation and battle mind. Although battle meditation wouldn't be that beneficial to the Dark Lord, battle mind would, and in a close contest such as this, could be just the thing needed to put him over the edge. Although Warlock does have the memory walk, I don't think it would be very effective against a telepath such as Sadow, who would most likely recognize the attack and defeat it. After this, however, Sadow is not bringing much to the table. While yes, his displays of sorcery are insane, he has only been able to do so with his additional technology present. He has never been seen using sorcery in the midst of combat. Now, this could just be due to the fact that he can't without his technology, or in my opinion, and the more likely reason, they just aren't combatively viable. Besides his sorcery, his skills in alchemy, Force Ghost, and essence transfer do not have much, if any, combative viability. Not to mention on top of this, Darth Warlock has skill in sorcery, which could allow him to defend against the attacks anyways. In addition to this, Warlock also has Tuta Minis as well as Force Lightning, the latter of which Sadow really doesn't have any defense against. While I do think it's clear that Naga Sadow is the more powerful of the two, Warlock's powers are powerful in his own right, as well as more combatively viable. Darth Warlock III gets the edge. And finally, we have reached the verdict. If these two titans of the dark side were to meet on the battlefield, who would emerge victorious? To begin, let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place on Kaller, with the winner winning a majority 7 out of 10 times. The two hulking Sith would emerge. The two would argue who was more powerful, before finally realizing that one of them would not make it out alive. Warlock would smile, testing the theory that the ancient Sith were more powerful. He reached out with the Force, and threw debris at the Sith pureblood. Sadow reached out and threw it away, before returning the favor, throwing fallen branches and rocks at the Emperor's voice. The Shagreen managed to get his shield up, and immediately attacked with his Force lightning. Sadow leaped out of the way, and drew his sword, lunging at Warlock. The early fight would be close, and neither opponent would really be gaining that much ground. The early goings of this fight in my eyes would primarily be a battle of Force powers. Each would try and gain ground, yet neither was actually accomplishing this. On top of this, neither would attempt any of their more potent abilities here, trying to truly test their opponent, without showing them everything they had to offer. As Sadow lunged at Warlock, his blade was up ready for a killing blow. At the last second, Warlock was also able to ignite his own weapon, and block the strike. The duel was clearly in Sadow's favor. His aggressive power put Warlock on the defensive, and he didn't have any time to counter before Sadow was already back with another strike. However, in one exchange, Warlock managed to sidestep the ancient Sith, and reached out with the Force. All of a sudden, countless versions of Warlock appeared around Sadow. Warlock would make sly remarks, but was in shock when Sadow merely smiles and dispelled the illusions around him, once more leaping at Warlock. The quickness in which Sadow dispelled the illusions caught the Shagreen off guard, and once more he was put on his back foot. The mid-fight goes to Naga Sadow. As the contest turns into more of a martial fight, Sadow's advantage is obvious. His relentless pressure puts Warlock on his back foot, and his balanced blade work isn't the best defense in this situation. And when he does finally get some space, Sadow can defend. Sadow's offensive was becoming more and more aggressive, but these strikes were also calculated, and driving Warlock back. Warlock, realizing he needed to get out of this duel, knew he had to try something drastic. Using his agility, he once more got free, and reached out with the Force. Using the memory walk, he was able to slow Sadow, and bring him down. But before Warlock could deliver the final blow, Sadow sprang up, and drove his sword through Warlock's chest. This fight comes down to Sadow's solid martial skill, and his tactical brilliance. While Warlock is a good duelist, it is clearly not his bread and butter, and once he has shown his relatively basic blade work, Sadow will have seen everything he has, and begin to analyze the best possible way to defeat him. Recognizing Warlock's power in the Force, Sadow would try and keep this one a saber fight, and for the most part, I think he can, with his aggressive in-your-face style. Although Warlock does have better Force abilities here, I also believe Sadow can defend against the most debilitating ones. This ultimately comes down to Sadow's own incredible telepathic abilities, which cancel out Warlock's illusions and memory walk. Warlock can win this fight if he manages to land some Force attacks and open Sadow up for a fatal blow. But I just don't see this happening, and more often than not, Sadow's superior skill with the blade, tactical prowess, and defense against Warlock's best Force attacks grant him the victory. I declare, Naga Sadow, the last Emperor, the victor. Well guys, I hope you all enjoyed this episode, as well as the entirety of the Legacy Era mini-marathon. If you like these sort of mini-marathons, let me know, and leave me some suggestions for some. Maybe I'll even tackle one next season. Once again, if you haven't seen the other videos of this marathon, the link to the playlist will be down below. With that said, I can't wait to bring you all the rest of Season 4, and stay tuned for what I think are some excellent matchups, as well as another collaboration between myself and Forklifter Matt. Once again, thank you all for the recent support, and look forward to seeing what you guys think of this matchup. Stay safe, and take care.